Well, hi everyone. Welcome to your next stop on the Friends of Figma World Tour. As I've mentioned, if you are joining, please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're dialing in from within the chat. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge that I am coming in from the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Bujar Nation, traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, and I pay respects to their elders past and present and emerging, and extend respect to any First Nations people on the call with us today. So, hello, I am Simon. I will be your host for today. I'm one of the Perth Friends of Figma community leads, and my origin story when I started within design starts way back in the year 2000 as a graphic designer and person that got involved in building CD-ROMs. Now I have aged myself in how long ago that was in using either Director or Flash way back in the day. The one thing that I have found over my design career is design is never static and always evolving. And so over those years, I've been involved in many teams, wearing many different hats. Sometimes I was allowed to touch code, but I always stayed on the design side where I could. Pretty much for the last 10 years or so, I've been in people leadership and team growth, and led a number of amazing design teams here in Perth at Australian Finance Group and RAC, being a few to mention. And now I find myself at Atlassian as part of the design system team, where I'm involved in leading our accessibility team within that space. So welcome to Perth. If you don't know too much about Perth, I'm very excited to shine a light on my little hometown. Perth has a claim to fame, and that claim to fame is we're the most isolated capital city in the world. Now, while most people would see that as a bad thing, I always say that is one of our gifts. It's unique. It makes us build strong communities together, and it's one of the things that I think has really helped grow creative industries and teams and individuals within our little slice of the world. So welcome to Perth, even though it may be virtually for some of you. If you're ever in town, always please feel free to reach out and come to one of our Friends of Figma meetups. Now, if this is your first stop on the Figma World Tour, this is a 24-hour global celebration of all the Friends of Figma communities around the globe, and looking to celebrate, these local community events that do exist. So our goal is really how can we celebrate the diversity of our communities and creativity that exists across the global scene. So the best part that I find about our Friends of Figma communities they are all community-led. Everyone that is involved are volunteers and made by local organisers, such as our group here in Perth. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to use the chat. And I will open up a Q&A so that you're able to ask questions throughout Aaron's presentation. And at the end, we'll be going through those questions. If you do require closed captions, underneath the little more option down in the toolbar down the bottom, you'll see an option where you can enable closed captions there to be able to turn that on for yourself. All right. Well, it brings me great pleasure to hand over to our presenter for today, Aaron. Aaron is a experienced design lead from Bankwest, and he's going to talk to us about the relationship between gaming and designing amazing experiences in the corporate world. So over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you for the introduction. So hi everyone. My name's Aaron. We're all here because we we love our UX, and hopefully maybe we are gamers. Maybe we just want to know how we can, bring that into our world a little bit more, or maybe we just are trying to figure out how I'm going to compare the two such vast different worlds and bring it together. So what I've learned in this time is that we often dismiss games as a serious tool, and they're just there for fun. And we reduce gamification in UX to badges and leaderboards. But games are powerful studies in decision making, especially under pressure. So today in this presentation, I want to run you through the design strategies that deliver the right information at the right time, and how we can apply those techniques in our design. So I've been playing games for a very long time. I started from a very young age. They were a big part of my life. I started with the Apple IIgs with the literal floppy disks, where you would put them in there. It would make loud clunking noises. You'd have to type a bit of code to get the game running. And I think there was even a point in time where one of those games would actually stop running once you've completed it. You couldn't actually launch it again. So games have changed for very long since those days. And then when the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, the NES, our family got an Atari. So we got to play with that, watch every other kid play with the NES, but it was also the introduction to multiplayer, and it felt more like a game experience there. So that kept going. By the time Super NES had come out, we finally got our original Nintendo, and we became a Nintendo family. And that was back in the days of console wars, and console wars were a part of your identity, and it was how you introduced yourself. It was, my name's Aaron, I'm from Perth, and we're a Nintendo family. You couldn't talk to people from Sega or, PlayStation coming down the line. So it was heavily ingrained in everything that I did growing up. So we moved to getting part-time jobs and being able to pay for our own stuff and get our own games and things like that. And looking back, I don't think a month has gone by in these 35 years where I haven't played or experienced the game in that time. That also went into adulthood and probably went a bit out of control, where I racked up a lot of playtime in games that I am both proud of and not proud of. Some late nights and some LAN parties and some uni lectures all missed there. But that all came to a grinding halt maybe about 3 years ago, when my beautiful daughter Mackenzie joined us. And so I got a reprieve from game, and I got to think more about what I get from games and why they're important to me, and make those future gaming sessions more purposeful. So I've been a professional designer for the last 10 years. I started my career, and the first 5 years of it was logo design and branding, using traditional Adobe Photoshop tools, Illustrator, InDesign, things like that. And then the rest was done as a corporate UXer, and it's what I do today, where it's much more about, understanding the customer problems, delivering great experiences, working in an agile format, and in more of a web-based Figma delivery system. Now, user researching and delivering great experiences isn't just unique to the corporate world. It comes through in games as well. And so over the last 5 years or so, I've also been picking up a program called Unity in my spare time as a hobby, and I've been making video game UI. And Unity isn't your typical design program. So someone who picks up a typical design tool like Photoshop or Illustrator or Figma, everything is nice and easy. And going to Unity is hard mode for a designer. For the learning curve is just massive. So for an example, there's no drop shadow button that you can just press and you get a drop shadow, and you just muck around with a few settings. If you wanted a drop shadow, you would create a button in Photoshop. You would, duplicate it, apply Gaussian blur, make it as spread as you'd like, export it as a white PNG, and then you'd import that white PNG into Unity, where you'd let Unity color it. So there's no auto layout either. So you can't just press a button and have things align on a 24 pixel grid, or have things perfectly placed and responsive based on, different monitor sizes and things like that. So all of this is to say, you don't get good design by default from Unity, and you become much more intentional with your design. You have to, if you want that drop shadow to come into Unity, you've thought about it, you've built it, you've seen exactly how you want light to react to that, and then you've exported it and brought it in. So let's imagine that we're building a dashboard for a salesperson in a typical corporate UX world. And we've got all your open cases, all the leads and the status, maybe a RAG status there. And it's just a standard table view. And then imagine up the top, you've got an overarching progress on how everything's tracking. Very typical dashboard stuff. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty standard. I imagine every UXer in here who's been given this brief would feel very comfortable in finding out how to build this. Now imagine there are triple the cases. And imagine that all those cases needed to be closed by close of business today. And then imagine that the user you're designing for has to compete against another salesperson. What decisions would you use within your UX toolkit that would enable your user to complete such an extreme task? And how would you even begin? Where would you look for inspiration? Video games lead to faster decisions that are no less accurate. So the University of Rochester ran a study that concluded that just by playing games, you can come to decisions faster at an accuracy rate that's exactly the same as anyone else coming to the same decision. You just get there faster. And that's pretty crazy. I didn't know just playing games would allow someone to do that. And I was thinking, why? It might be because video games put you in scenarios that are much higher stakes than real life. You're not fighting Greek gods every day. And so I dug deeper and I had a look at one of the quotes that was pulled out of the study. And action video games players' brains are more efficient collectors of visual and auditory information, and therefore arrive at the necessary threshold of information they need to make a decision much faster than non-gamers, the researchers found. So they can take in visual and audio information faster. But if you think about that and you look deeper into it, collect visual information to make a decision faster, that's exactly what our goal is with good UX design. It's exactly what we do. So while I believe that playing actions can achieve these outcomes, I agree with what the study came to, what the conclusion was, but I'm willing to bet the UI interface designed for these games enabled the users to process the information. So take chess, very limited UI. There is a 8x8 grid, black and white squares, some shape language that kind of determines what the pieces are, but it doesn't tell you how to do it or how to play it. When you pick up a piece, you have to know that. It's very limited UI there. This game is incredibly strategic, though. It's been studied for generations. It's changed over generations. People are still playing it today. People dedicate their life to writing books about it. And you can see why. After the first turn, there are 400 possible moves that you can do from that. And after turn 4, there are 71,000 moves that can happen. After turn 6, there's 9.1 million. And then plus 7 turns, there's 3.2 billion possible moves and outcomes that a chess game can take. So how do people take in enough information to be able to make these decisions? If you take StarCraft 2, which is a very, very competitive video game made maybe a decade now ago, there's 100 trillion possible moves at any time. I don't know what that number is. That's too many numbers. 100 trillion possible moves at any time. So how is that possible? StarCraft is about building a base. It's about mining resources, building an army, and taking out an opponent trying to do the exact same thing. StarCraft is a real-time strategy. The genre is real-time strategy. So it adds the element of time. Chess is turn-based. So you take a turn, they take a turn. But in StarCraft, everything's happening at once. And because there's no grid, there's no predetermined number of moves. Units can you move anywhere. You can move a tiny bit, a large amount. You can send them across the map. So users have to make the best decision every single second using situational awareness that has an unlimited skill ceiling. The skill ceiling of this game is so incredibly large that they have bots, and this is before ChatGPT and before AI was a massive thing. They would create bots that would play the game and then have tournaments trying to verse them against each other. This game is broken down into two halves, macro and micro. Macro is building a base, training individual units and managing your economy, and then increasing the supply to feed the armies that you're sending across to fight. And then micro is the other half of it. It's the actual fight. It's the paper, scissors, rock between the strengths and weaknesses. You know, tanks are better than infantry, but then anti-airs can take out tanks. There's a constant paper, scissors, rock battle that happens there. So there are two very different things that are happening all at once, and a lot of information to take in. And now if we take a look at the personas that can come out of StarCraft, you could have a bronze level player who has 60 actions per minute, and grandmasters who have 300 actions per minute. And an action per minute, it could be something as simple as moving a unit or clicking on a map or training a new unit or just a single individual action. And we're talking about, when we say 60 actions per minute, that means they're making one action per second for roughly 20 minutes is the average length of a game, could go longer. And a grandmaster can do 300 APM, which is 5 actions per second. And we're not even talking about how many, that they're their actions per second. We're not talking about how many decisions they had to make in their brain before they could take that action. So I've got a video here of a typical StarCraft fight. This is only one side of the battle. It seems like the one side is won and they're just going through the base and finishing it off. I know it looks like a lot, but there's method to this madness, right? So the units, they're overlapping a lot. They're kind of stacking all over top of each other. And the first thing I want to call out from a UI point of view is the decision for the thick black border that sits behind those health bars. So regardless of color, regardless of VFX, regardless of anything that's happening underneath, I can always see those health bars. And it's really important because they're also color coded, right? So as soon as, when it's green, everything's happy. But as soon as I start to see, yellow come out or red come out, I know that I need to pay attention to that. I know I need to select them. I know that that unit is in danger and I need to get them out of the fight. If you're a smaller unit, you have less health bars. If you're a larger unit, you have bigger health bars. They've baked in, contrast and color recognition and shape language into this health bar that makes it instantly recognizable. So if someone is in danger and they have turned red, you would just select a big box over everything and you would select all the units. And you can see I've just paused it here. You can see at the bottom when you've selected all the units, it would be as simple as finding which one of those is red, clicking on them, you individually select them, you move them out of the fight, rinse and repeat. So this bottom HUD here is acting as a control center. And what we've seen there is the micro. This is the middle of the fight. But if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a little map, and that's what we refer to as a mini map. And that shows the entire ground, entire war ground overhead view, where you can clearly see your base being built, all the units walking around it, and it lets the user look down at it and see if anything's going on. If there's any red inside that base, they know the enemy's inside there. Maybe the enemy's making movements to another base. What this does is this HUD down the bottom allows the user to be both in micro and macro at the exact same time, taking in information and being able to make decisions on a massive scale. So it's a pretty intense use of interaction design in a very extreme case. I know it's better than it's getting a user to be able to see both the macro and the micro is better than anything I've ever been able to make. So if we look back at the casual personas and the power users, with a casual persona, their jobs to be done, their pain points is I want to know if I've missed something important and I want to be kept in control in the middle of crazy fights. So you see when everything's happening there, it's an anxiety building exercise playing a game of StarCraft, especially for someone who feels like they're losing control. So to be able to grab a bunch of units, color match who I want, click them, send them out is a godsend. And then you look at the power user who has to make 300 of these actions, and they don't want the UI or effects to get in their way, and they want to do what they need to do quickly. So when we look at something back here, you can see just above the bottom HUD, there's 1 through to 7 little numbers along there. And what that is they're shortcuts. It allows me as a user to, before the fight's even started, say these 3 units, you're group 1, these 5 units, you're group 2, and set as many of those shortcuts as they'd like. Because the thing is, they've been in this experience before. They've done this 100 times, they've done it 1,000 times. So when they walk into the fight, they want to have direct access. They want to have instant control to thing that's going to happen and be able to act on it fast. So the UI kind of gets out of their way. They don't need to carry on these big drag and drop boxes to select who they need. They've now set something up prior to getting into the thick of it. And then you think back to corporate UX and you think back to, well, power users specifically, and what can you actually do to enable them to set things up so that when they're in the thick of it, it's much easier, much less of a cognitive load. I'd like to talk about another game called Balatro, maybe a more recent game. It may have taken a few hours off a few people watching here, but it was a massive sensation. It's a very simple game. You play poker hands and you get points. That's all Balatro is. You've got a pair, a 3 of a kind, a 4 of a kind, a straight, a flush, all typical poker hands. And the idea is that you want to change your deck over the time so you can get the cards you want more so that you can play them, right? So you can get a bigger number, you can get a bigger score. And the idea is to keep doing this, keep modifying your deck to maximize how much money points you can get, and basically show what's the E letter on a calculator does. No one knows what it does, but it's a very big number. And that's the beauty of Balatro, that the game is built to be broken. And that's actually one of its greatest designs. So in this example, you'll see that the required amount of points up in the top left-hand corner. It's 600. User discards a few cards, and then they play the cards coming out here, and they get points, and it gets given to them, right? You'll see that they get blue points for playing the standard cards, and then they've got jokers up the top, which give them red points. And the idea is they get as many blue points, as many red points as possible, and then you multiply them together, and that's your final score. So you're constantly trying to get those two multipliers higher so that when they multiply at the end, it's the highest score. So we'll walk through that hand, and we'll walk through exactly what's happened as that person's played that hand. So firstly, the user has selected these 5 cards, and the game has told them that you're going to get a flush. You're going to get 35 points, 35 blue points straight away, and 4 red points. It doesn't tell me what the score is. It just tells me that these are the 2 multipliers you're going to get. And then when you play the cards, each individual card will add to that blue point, and that number will slowly go up, 35, 42, 76. Once again, it's still not telling me what my final score is, but I know the number's going up. That's great. But at no point throughout the entirety of this phase do you ever get told exactly what you're going to score. And it's the obfuscation of the total score that's a special source of the experience. So players can't do that quick math. They don't know what they're going to score. They can try and guess. But what they can do, and you'll see in here as I repeat this, is that when the player gets to a certain point where they know they're going to pass a level, these flames start rising, right? And you get this visual feel that, oh, the player's on fire. Here we go, baby. This is gonna work out. And then it goes and shows the final score, and then applies it to your round score. So if we go back and we watch the player play their hand again, they discard the few, they select them. And as soon as they select the 5, it tells them that they've got a flush. Even before they press play, we've given confirmation to the user that, hey, you're about to do the right thing, that this is what's going to happen. And I think that's really important. Then one at a time, we go 11, 10, 9, 7, 4. Then there's a little bit of a pause before it shows the red. So it's forever building this tension. You can see it's created a rhythm, it stops, and then the 6 comes, the flame happens, you've got 760 points. So this is an example of late game Balatro, right? Where you've broken the game. The player clearly has 5 queens of diamonds. You don't get that in a typical deck of cards. And you can see that the effects that are coming here, every time it reacts to a joker, things are shaking, numbers are going higher. The screen shake turns into a proverbial earthquake. And these are all things that are making you feel like you're doing better than you need to. And then the flames are just massive. The whole place is on fire. It's clear that I've got a good hand here, and you see the numbers are so astronomically high that it doesn't matter. I've won. I know I've won. And the cards flicker around everywhere like you've won a game of free cell, which is fantastic. And all the tension and release build up comes to a head. So Balatro is a king of tension and release. And what it teaches us is that just because UX can deliver information instantly, should it? We have a habit of giving the user absolutely everything they need straight away. But is there extra experience, not a business benefit, but something that actually helps the customer achieve more by holding back the numbers up until the end? And as a player, you can feel if you're doing well. And how can we replicate that in our experiences? If I was to remove all the numbers away from those videos that we just watched, you could still feel that you were doing well. And vice versa. If you weren't doing the right thing, you could also be told that you weren't doing well. And lastly, players believing that they're breaking the game creates a powerful sense of achievement, even if it's intended. So it really gives them agency and freedom and ownership of what they're doing if they believe that they are beating the system or breaking the game to their benefit. So I'll take a step back and we'll talk about the kinds of UIs that we just saw there. We have diegetic UIs and we have not diegetic UIs. What we looked at, Balatro and StarCraft, they rely heavily on information displayed. So I would regard them closer in the not bucket. But diegetic UIs, they match the theme and the experience of the world, and then they show the user interfaces and information based on the game objects inside there. So if you look at Fallout, they have Pip-Boys, which is this massive, big a wristwatch they kind of have to wear with this DOS interface inside it. And then you're constantly bringing up your wrist to see information. You can see that there's a DOS layout, which is probably harder to read, but it keeps people immersed inside the game. And when you look at Sea of Thieves, you take the role of a pirate and you go to your ship and you walk on your ship. And you might walk to the front of the ship and you see an island off in the distance and you say, look, I want to sail over to that island. What you'll have to do to figure out how to get there is to turn around, run back into the ship near the wheel and look down, physically move your character and look down at the map where you'll see everything laid out there. And then as soon as you go out there and figure out how, mast your sail and start going in that direction, if you've forgotten where you need to go, you'll actually need to run back in there and look back down at the map. So it's actually the worst UX experience out there. It's typically a really bad experience. There's no button that you can press that just brings up the map and shows the user exactly what they need to know. But the goal of a diegetic UI is to keep the user immersed inside the experience and provide creative ways to navigate the worlds that you've created. It continues the willing suspension of disbelief. We really want to keep them engaged inside here. So while it's against what we do in UX, it's a brilliant lesson in showing and not telling. Sometimes we just need to keep the user in the experience and show them rather than list out everything that they can do at every given moment and really increase that cognitive load. If we look at the non-diegetic side, we see more of what us UX designers are accustomed to. This is where action stops so you can read. It's typically more calmer. The IA layouts, the information architecture layouts with tree menus. So you have settings and everything there. You have items and a list of all your items. And it leans on those existing UI patterns that they expect from game to game that make it easy for them. So you can still muck around with the dial between form and function, just because non-diegetic may seem more minimalistic and more typical UI and not as creative. You can see Persona 5 on the left-hand side still injects style and theme and probably fails every accessibility guideline out there. And you can still be immersive within the world. And lastly, I want to talk about the patterns, UI patterns. And in the corporate world, we have design systems, right? And UI patterns. And in games, they're no different. So health is something that you wouldn't typically see in a corporate UX pattern. I hope not. And it's a very important pattern because it's often the goal for the user. It's the literal life or death for that user. So the information needs to be presented very contextually so the user understands what's going on and can survive. If a user has a low health, they're more likely to retreat, more likely to be risk adverse with their actions. Whereas if they know that they're healthy, then they can make decisions based on that. So in a game that I'm designing myself in a hobby, imagine you've got me here and I'm a little character, little circle capsule character. And I've got a little overhead health bar. So it just sits above me and it follows me. If I run to the side, it follows me everywhere I go. And now imagine that we've got 7 others, all with their own health bar. And imagine that we've got 4 of them with enemy health bars and 4 of them are allies, including yourself. So how do you go about providing the information to the user while staying out of their way? And so when we look at the health bar and designing a health bar, we think what numbers are actually important to say and what do I need to show versus tell. So in this game here, you have 30 seconds to make a decision. You might talk to your teammates and say, hey, look, I can do 20 damage. And your teammate pipes up and he's, I can do 10 damage and I can do 5. Great, we can do 35 damage together. Is this enough? And so when that conversation is happening inside that small turn-based time frame, it's important for us to show the number, show the health number here so they can make an accurate calculation. If we just approximated and gave them a 3/4 health bar with no numbers there, the user wouldn't have enough information to actually to make a decision, an informed decision on this. So, and once we find that user problem of this health being the most important thing for this bar, then we can use the information hierarchy that we kind of get from that to push everything else down. Energy, ammunition, they can all become less important and take up less space. And lastly, I want to show you the micro interaction design of what happens when you get hit. So you start on 100 health. That's your default state. And then all of a sudden 50 damage gets done to you. So we show 50 damage as a number. We show 50. And then we get that initial hit state. And so we make the bar white, and that's to match the shake and the initial knockback of, oh, wow, I've actually just been hit. I'm dazed. And then very quickly that will switch to a red, and that'll indicate damage, the pain setting in as the bar starts to fall down. And we'll scroll back on the numbers. There'll be a free fall of numbers that go from 100 to 50 so that we don't know where that number is going to land. The user doesn't know how much damage they're about to take. And then we will add screen shake to the bar. And the good thing about applying screen shake gives 2 things in this example. One, by shaking something on the screen, it shows the user there is something of importance. So if a user sees something moving, they look at it, that makes sense. This must be important. And then we can double it on as the knockback effect of, oof, I've actually been taking damage. We finish all this micro interaction off with a pulse of blood behind there. So we actually link the static 50 number to blood, to health, to the player's survival. So in summary, video games push the boundaries of interaction design. Use video games as extreme cases of interaction design that you can draw inspiration from. We saw that with StarCraft that we can create interfaces that arm the user with the right info at the right time so they can make more decisions without actually making less mistakes. And we need to find the balance between showing and telling. We saw with the diegetic UIs how we can immerse people into experiences without actually telling them numbers as a way for them to experience themselves and make them feel in control. And lastly, we can lean on real world feelings and experiences to fuel those micro interactions. So that last hit bar, the hit on the health bar only lasts 500 milliseconds, but you can base that on real world feelings and real world interactions, and then bring that back into your design so that the user can instantly connect those two. So while you won't have a health bar, hopefully, in your corporate UX, what about when money comes out of their account? What about when cards decline and things like that? How can we take what we know from those real world experiences and then bring them into this digital world, which can sometimes feel shallow without it? So I hope that by incorporating this and taking video games seriously as an inspiration when you're making these designs, that we can increase our own users' decision-making time with no less accuracy and create more engaging experiences for all of our users. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
That was awesome, Aaron. Thank you. Yes, we've got a few questions in the Q&A. Feel free for anyone else to add some other questions in there. And also just as a reminder, you can go in there and upvote any questions. But I'll start off with the one that we've got at the top, which is from Harrison. So what situations would you consider using a diegetic UI outside of a game design?
Fantastic. The first one that comes to me is the Apple Torch. If any iOS users here, we went to a very flat and minimal design for a very long time, and one of the last updates, we had the torch that you can hold, and it's just a flashlight on the back of your phone, but you can actually slide it up and down, and it actually shows what it would look like, what kind of light you're trying to achieve. And I know you're still, interacting with your finger, but the way that you're kind of controlling the light and seeing how that will reflect out into what the output is, which is the light, I always thought was really clever and a good return back to that stuff. I think extreme diegetic UIs might actually have quite a hard time fitting directly in. You want to take the individual cases on what makes that diegetic UI effective and how can that help solve the problem. And who knows, maybe when we see like more wearables come into effect and we have to recreate the design language for wearables and UI, we might actually see, and VR, sorry, we might actually create the UI that will lean on diegetic uses.
Awesome. So next up is a question from Courtney. How would you identify pain points that affect multiple stakeholders in a service ecosystem and determine which would benefit from gaming-inspired service design?
Service ecosystem. Can we elaborate on that a little bit, Courtney? If I take that into Simon, would you?
Courtney, if you're able to share a bit more information, maybe in the chat.
What a meaty question! I love that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Determine which would benefit from gaming-inspired service design. I think you would be in general, when you're trying to implement things that you've learnt that have been effective in games and trying to bring it back into corporate UX. I think the worst thing you could do is say, hey, I got this from a game, or hey, this is exactly how they do it in a game. This is exactly how we should do it in this corporate UX lens. I think you'll get laughed out the room, even though you might be the smartest person in the room. That's neither here nor there. But when you dig deeper into that experience and you say, well, why was that effective? And why did that motivate the user to do X? And why did that make it feel more satisfying? You might find that it's just a bit of behavioral psychology. Maybe it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. Maybe there's something else at play that you can then take back to your design and then and understand why that motivation is so strong, rather than directly take a pirate map from a ship and do the service design on a big pirate map.
So Courtney's just added into the chat. So for example, frontline staff, backend staff versus customers, who all have different systems that they interact with.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think the answer hopefully gets a lot of that. That is a multiple prong attack. It's you wouldn't use one for all. You would have to look individually at those customers, identify those pain points, and then see if there are any links between the two. I don't even know if you could, pull them together right now. Maybe, off the top of my head, think about dungeon masters in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Where they control the game, they control the experience, and then the player gets to interact with the experience. And I wonder what happens if you just spitball with that and kind of flip that onto, the front end service representative being the DM or the GM, and the customers being orcs.
Awesome. A very, very meaty question.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got two from Melissa, but I'll go with the top one for now. So what advice do you have for UX designers? Everything just jumped for me. What advice do you have for UX designers from corporate design wanting to transition into games?
Right. Financially, don't just jump. There's like still a lot to learn and see if you actually enjoy it, because it depends. You've got a designer and you've got a developer, and those lines, in design right now, they're blurring. But in the game world, you start to go further and further into the tech artistry, which is this middle bit between design and dev handoff, right? And if it pays for you to learn that and understand that. And I think if you download Unity tonight even, I actually have a YouTube video on explaining just how to like use Unity as a designer for the first time. So I'll link something like that down here. But just get into it and then try to recreate games that you love playing. You know, a health bar or something like that. See how it comes into Unity. It's quite similar. It's got a layers panel. It's got a bunch of settings you apply on the side. It's just a new tool. And then start from there. So understand if you like it. Understand if you really want to dive into the world of tech artistry. But if you want to be a 100% UI designer in games, you'll need to at least build a portfolio from that, and then try to go for some more bigger studios that can actually have dedicated UX game researchers and dedicated UI researchers.
Okay, so next up from TK, how do you decide between UX principles and traditional game interfaces to design modern game UIs appealing to both traditional gamers and new gamers?
So I think a good core game will appear to traditional and new gamers. I think if a good game is accessible and can still provide the same reward as even if you're a seasoned vet playing for the first time, it can still bring joy if it's new, easy, accessible. So that's for the second half of that question. But deciding between, you know, using traditional game interfaces to design modern game UI, you have to, you know, understand, well, what's the goal of the user? What do you want the user to actually achieve? And then go back to what's the best way to do it. And then what games has a lot of is just trying it, just doing it. And then, does this feel fun? Is this creating more than what I've put on the screen? And so what I find every time that I, you know, dive into games or design and dive into the UI in games is that you'll design things and you'll put them there and you'll be like, oh, that looks pretty good. I can understand how that's going to work. 2 different shapes, for example. But then when you press the play button and you watch them interact with each other, that's where the magic is. And if you find that, and if you see that, then you know you're onto something and you can keep going. Maybe there's a framework to get to that magic point faster. I haven't found it. If there is, I think there'd be a lot more good games if that was the case.
Awesome. Well, look, we've got a few left we can fly through. So another one from Melissa. What's your favorite video game versus the game that you've put the most hours into?
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so the games that I've typically put the most hours into have been competitive online games. And for me, it is less about the video game is just me, my skill. It's just skills. It doesn't matter that it's a video game or playing sports. The real driver is the competitive edge and getting that win. And if not, playing that again. And that's, you know, that is a bit of a rabbit hole, bit of a spiral, and I understand how competitive I am. So games like that, typically I sink so many hours into. For example, Rocket League is sitting at 5K hours, and League of Legends doesn't even count hours, but that was throughout my time in university where you didn't have anything to do. So I'm sure I had more League of Legends hours in that space. But as far as like favorite games, look, that's a hard one. I think it would probably be a single game, and it's hard to point to one back in time because new games come and then you're like, why did I even like that previous game? But typically my favorite kind of games now are ones that have real well-written stories and dialogue that feels natural, like mocap kind of talking between 2 people. So Clair Obscur, Expedition 33 or any of those visual novel games like Until Dawn. And yeah, I just love watching that conversation happening and feeling like an interactive movie. I think that's my favorite.
Awesome. All right. These will be our final two. I'm going to go with Brett's first because it's been there for a while. Are you a fan of skeuomorphism?
I don't think I am. I like what it's trying to achieve with its tactile nature of buttons feeling like they need to be selected. And I'm glad that iOS is moving back into that. You know, I don't know if Liquid Glass is going to be successful, but I'm glad that they're moving further into that because it feels like I'm getting something back. And games obviously, you know, lean into that tenfold. I don't think I'm a fan of skeuomorphism, but I like what it's trying to do. I don't think that it needs to mix that minimal glass side of it to it all. That's just me.
Yeah. All right, and then final one from Taylor. How might we use gamification within the utilities industry to encourage positive changes in user behavior by clearly demonstrating the benefits, such as cost savings, environmental impact, and yeah, any other ideas off the top of your head?
Okay. Right. So I don't know how to, I don't know what the positive change will be as environmental impact and stuff. I'm not going to pretend to know that, but the way I would unpick that is when you see gamification that's been brought into UX, corporate UX design, it's quite shallow and it's quite cheap. And the cheap dopamine hits. It's the leaderboards and, you know, oh, you've got to the top, fantastic. Or congratulations on completing your profile. And it feels real shallow. And when you look deeper into a game like, you know, World of Warcraft, for example, that has experience bars tied to leveling up individual things, tied to, you know, gear that you can wear, the social standing that you have. I think all the psychological levers that games like that pull need to be effectively put into not just surface level MVP pushed into games, but really like understand what drives the user to do the next thing, and compound on top of each other and really give value back to the users. I think everyone really understands that people are trying to force them to do everything and people are trying to do it. So how can we give them genuine value back? That's where I would start anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. With some of the other questions, what we'll do, we'll look at answering those through our LinkedIn page and be able to provide some responses, or Aaron can provide some responses to those. However, we've still got a few things left of order of business. One being, Aaron, we need to choose a winner of the best question. This can be in any way you felt it either inspired you, stumped you, whatever the metric may be, and the winner of that receives a $50 gift voucher to the Figma store to be able to buy some sweet swag of some sort.
That is a tough one. I don't know if you all were incentivized. It was a fantastic incentive because these are some of the most intense questions I think I've ever had after a panel. So kudos to this as an encouragement metric. Which question though? I really loved Courtney's because it made me stop and think even larger than an individual game and about at a service level, right? Where there's more parts than just the gamer, just one end user. And what happens if we throw gamification over multiple different you know, personas in a massive blueprint? Yeah, I think Courtney.
All right. Well, congratulations, Courtney. If you're able to just stay on at the end of the session, and I can grab your details to be able to give you all the info on that. But we're nearly at time, and so there's obviously more sessions happening within the World Tour, and there's actually 2 sessions happening in kicking off in a few minutes. So one for the Friends of Figma Kuala Lumpur team, titled Why Motion, where Yaman from Files will be talking about helping us sort of understand the power of motion in digital experiences, how it can help us enhance communications, and why designers and developers, should be looking to embrace motion within their process. So that's one session, and then the other, happening at the same time, is all about storytelling in UX. So I think, this resonates with a lot of what you've shared, Aaron, around the importance within the UX side of the work that we do. So I loved the description to this talk, where it was UX storytelling is like expecting ketchup with your fries. It has to be there, but there's always a surprising lack of appreciation on how much it can elevate that experience for you. So I think there's a great story in there from the team at the Friends of Figma Philippines group. So they're the two options for you as you continue across the world tour. Across all of the sessions, we're keen to be able to get feedback on the experience of the world tour. So please, if you haven't already, please take a moment to scan this QR code and send us through your feedback, and it will help us as we continue to do this next year, that how we can look at improving that experience. Now, I do want to call out that, as we know, nothing great is ever made alone. Everything we do is around collaboration, as you know, and a huge thank you to all of the people involved within all of the communities across all the Friends of Figma, bringing together all of the sessions that are happening over the next 24 hours. So as was mentioned, all of the recordings from all of the sessions will be shared out, and you can keep an eye out for that on each of our various social media channels and community channels, as well as there will be a dedicated YouTube channel where all of these will be housed. So finally, a massive thank you to Aaron. I loved hearing this talk. I love the connection that it creates into the work that we do. And massive thank you to everyone for attending, and see you in some future sessions.
Thanks for having me. See you
All
later,
right.
everyone.
Thanks all.